estate business because I know you very well. You're brutal killers, not nice people at all, but you have to vote for them. You have no choice. You're not going to vote for Pocahontas, I can tell you that. You're not going to vote for the wealth tax. Yeah, let's take 100% of your wealth away. No, even if you don't like me, some of you don't. Some of you I don't like at all, actually. And you're going to be my biggest supporters because you'll be out of business in about 15 minutes if they get it.
Welcome to Real News. I'm Mark Steiner. Great to have you here with us today. Now, those are the lines that most of America heard. They were shocking, not only because Trump hit the darkest anti-Semitic tropes, trying to deliver them like some washed-up Borscht Belt comedian, but because his audience, mostly Jewish leaders, ate it up. Imagine telling racist stories to a black audience and then having that audience cheering at being ridiculed. Think about who he was talking to at that moment. The Israel-American Council, one of the most right-wing Jewish groupings in our country that supports Republican candidates and was founded and funded by Sheldon Adelson, who gave $30 million to the Trump campaign. And this group gave over $200 million to that campaign. It took a while for the Jewish establishment to confront these anti-Semitic statements. Let's think about this very strange moment when anti-Semites support Israel, where a right-wing regime controls Israel, a nation that was once loved and lauded by most Americans, and Jews viewed it as a source of pride. Now the lines seem twisted and almost unfathomable. We're going to try to untangle those with Richard Silverstein, who tackles these very issues in his column and Tikkun Olam, in his blog, I should say, where he covers Israel national security state. He has written books and contributed to the essay collections A Time to Speak Out, Independent Jewish Voices on Israel, Zionism, and Jewish Identity, and Israel, Palestine, Alternative Perspectives on Statehood. And Richard, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thanks. I'm pleased to be here.
So let's just I guess the first thing most people saw was that moment when Trump made this horrendous, ancient trope about Jews and money, and it was shocking, but not as shocking as a response from a mostly Jewish audience.
Well, we've become inured to Trump's anti-Semitism. It goes back to Charlottesville when he called the right-wingers who ended up killing one of the protesters there, fine people, and he's really used these sort of tropes regularly before. And so hearing it again, it barely made a ripple in the media. Was covered maybe by the Jewish media and by Israeli media, but the non-Jewish media sort of saw it as more of the same. So it's really shocking that a U.S. president would use these kinds of tropes and not be called out for it. And you heard also barely a whimper from even the major national Jewish organizations about it. There were 2 tweets from the American Jewish Committee and from the Anti-Defamation League, and even those tweets began with praise for Trump before they said that perhaps he went over the line and perhaps he should reconsider his views on this subject and what he says about it. So it's really shocking that we have a president that does this and that we've really inoculated ourselves to it, unfortunately.
When I think about it, even people like Richard Nixon and Johnson, others who have made racist and anti-Semitic statements behind closed doors wouldn't even fathom doing this in public.
Right. When we heard the Nixon tapes, we knew he was an anti-Semite, but he was very careful in his public utterances not to go there, and he was smart enough to know that. But Trump really is unfiltered, and he doesn't have a filter that the rest of us have to know how to speak in public.
So I want to take a look at this one clip here from the speech. And this is where, and I think goes to the heart in some ways of the contradictions I alluded to in the opening, which talks about Jews who don't love Israel. Let's watch Trump.
The Jewish state has never had a better friend in the White House than your president, Donald J. Trump. That I can tell you. We have to get the people of our country, of this country, to love Israel more. I have to tell you that. We have to do it. We have to get them to love Israel more because you have people that are Jewish people, that are great people. They don't love Israel enough. You know that. You know that.
So let's talk about this. And there's another piece I wanted to talk about in a moment as well. But here we have Trump saying these outlandish things, and this is what people love, is who talks about who this audience is. To me, this is emblematic of this split inside the Jewish world that's also emblematic about the split in our own country.
Well, you have this Israel America Council that's funded by Sheldon Adelson. It's really oriented towards the 1 million or so Israelis that have emigrated here from Israel and made their homes in the United States. And it's meant to be a sort of farther right version of AIPAC, and it's meant to really sort of instill inside of American politics the right-wing nature of Israeli politics, the Likud government, and this sort of what I call the Judeo-fascist, government that's running Israel, and they're trying to really enforce a kind of a speech regime in the United States among American Jews, where we can have a very limited set of things that we can talk about and say about Israel, and that we have to sort of hone to the talking points that are put forward by Israel lobby organizations like IAC and AIPAC. So the notion, though, that you only love Israel if you support this Likud government, you only love Israel if you support making Jerusalem the capital of the Israeli state, or recognizing the Golan as Israeli sovereign territory, or, as we're going to see soon, perhaps annexing the Jordan Valley. This is not love. Really, this is like a slavish kind of obedience to a narrow-minded perspective on what Zionism is and what Israel is. And we mustn't lose sight of the fact that only 29% of American Jews actually support Trump. So you're only seeing in that audience the 29%. You're not seeing this over 60% of American Jews that absolutely reject everything that Trump stands for, including his views about Israel. And that's where people like me and others in the progressive Jewish community really have to speak out more and make our voices heard more, and sort of react against this and really put it in the proper perspective like we're doing right now.
So, I mean, one of the things you said in your article, you talked about the tweets that leaders of establishment Jewish groups put out a day late. And the tweets, let's describe these for a minute, because this is where the contradictions, I think, come to rise, and where it's really hard. It was clearly very difficult for them, because he knew these were anti-Semitic statements that were made, deeply anti-Semitic, but that wasn't as important as the political forces they're trying to push.
Well, I think what we have to remember is that there are wealthy Jewish, I call them oligarchs, billionaires like Adelson and Ron Lauder and Bernie Marcus and others like that, who are the major donors to these organizations. So these are Republican, hardy Republican Jewish donors, support the Republican candidates with lots and lots of money, and they also support these Jewish organizations. So they're really compromised. They can't, even if they do speak out, as the tweets did, they have to really temper what they're saying very carefully and praise Trump before they enter into any criticism of him. And the content of the tweets were what I call milquetoast. They didn't really get to the heart of what's wrong with what Trump was doing. Sort of like they tapped him on the wrist. They gave him a little slap on the wrist and said, no, don't do that. That's bad what you're doing. But they're not speaking out with the full weight of the denunciation that these kinds of statements deserve. And that's a problem, because the leadership of the American Jewish community is completely attenuated and compromised and can't defend and represent American Jewry the way that they should.
Well, let's take these couple of things here real quick before we conclude. One of the things that he said, it was quoted in Times of Israel, that he made a joke about his having 12 years as president, that he was going to go on, and when he did that, people laughed and applauded.
Right. I think that people in the audience were even saying 12 more years.
Yes, exactly. They chanted 12 more years.
Well, I mean, you have to also keep in mind this is a largely Israeli audience. So even though they may be here in America, they kind of don't understand the sort of nuances of American politics. I mean, nuances for them, but for us, it's the U.S. Constitution.
Right.
So the fact that
Right.
we only allow a president to have 8 years may be a nicety for them. And, it's like, they wanted to. It's happy talk for them, and they wanted to make Trump happy. And Trump clearly doesn't really care or know much about our own Constitution either. So in a way, it was a match made in heaven between the audience and Trump.
So let's play this final clip here we're going to show today, which is Trump talking about how he views Jews in a very strange monologue.
For over 20 years, every previous president promised to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and they never acted, they never did it, they never had any intention of doing it, in my opinion. 2 years ago this week, I officially recognized Israel's true and eternal capital, and we opened the American Embassy in Jerusalem, finally. Many, many presidents said they were going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. And they never did it, and I understand why they never did it. They never did it because when they thought I was going to do it, and when they heard that I was going to make an announcement in 2 weeks, I started getting calls from everyone. I got calls from presidents. I got calls from prime ministers. I got calls from kings and queens. I got calls from everyone. Don't do it. Don't do it, please. Don't do it. It will be terrible if you do it. It will be horrible if you do it. Then and there, for that 2-week period, I was inundated. I learned why other presidents, in all fairness to them, why they made the campaign promise, but why they never got it off. You wouldn't believe how many. Some countries you never even heard of were calling.
Richard, if my grandfather was watching that with me right now, my grandfather would say, "Oy vey, what a putz." I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it's so. But I want to let's talk a minute about what he said here, what he did at this moment. But I'm curious your thoughts on what the response is, especially what the response will be in this 2020 year by progressive Jews and Jews in America when you see this kind of behavior and these kind of lines and the contradictions that are arising everywhere. What do you think? Well, how do progressive Jews respond to this? How do the entire Jewish community respond to this?
Well, I think that Jews that have some awareness of what's going on in Israel and the Middle East understand that the reason why the U.S. Embassy was never moved to Jerusalem was that we held out hope that there could be a compromise solution and a peace negotiation that resolved the conflict between Israel and Palestine. And most Americans and most Jews understood that recognizing Jerusalem as the capital really completely sabotaged any possibility of there being a peace agreement. And Trump, of course, he's so, I don't know if stupid is the right word or whatever the right word is to use, but he only looks and sees what's right in front of his face. And he thinks that it's a good idea to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and doesn't see farther into the trees to understand that there's no chance of a peace agreement. And the peace agreement is what everybody wanted to keep their eyes on, that prize, whereas Trump really doesn't understand the complexity of this situation. So the fact that he thinks that recognizing Jerusalem is the sine qua non of the way America should deal with Israel is really the tragedy of this administration, one of the many tragedies of this administration, because we will take years after Trump leaves the scene to recover from this. We're going to have an Israeli government that has been emboldened and gotten everything that they've ever wanted from the United States, but not been able to get before. I think that we've lost the chance for peace for perhaps another decade or two, if we ever had one before. And the stupidity and the inanity and the ignorance of the Trump administration and the ill-fated Middle East peace plan that he and Kushner have been promising to unveil, which I don't think will ever see the light of day. These are really deep and great tragedies that will take us a long time to come out from under.
Richard Silverstein, thanks so much for joining us today. And folks, Check his column out at Tikkun Olam. Good to have you with us. Look forward to more conversations.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Been a pleasure.
Mine too. And I'm Mark Steiner here for the Real News Network. Please let us know what you think. Take care.
Thanks a lot for watching. Appreciate it. But do us one more solemn favor. Hit the subscribe button below. You know you want to. Stay up on the videos.